Welcome to Shed Talk. This next guest, I would say it's called the Mr. Stampede. He's a guy that knows just about everything about Stampede. And why is that? Well, Joe Cowley is the CEO, the main guy for the Calgary Stampede.
Creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk.
You know what? Welcome to Shed Talk.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, thanks. And you know what? I was just talking about, because the other day, what was it? Guy Weddick, it's his 100th...
Weddick.
Yeah. And I was looking it up, and it was his 140th birthday. And was this the guy that started the Stampede?
He started the Stampede Festival, but our history actually extends farther back than that.
Oh, and I've been a Calgarian for, well, I'm, what am I, 57 years old? And enlighten me, please.
Yeah, so we actually began as the Calgary District and Agricultural Society. And we were incorporated in 1884, in August of 1884. That's 9 years after Fort Calgary was established. It's about a year after the railroad came to Calgary, and it's actually about 2.5 months before the town of Calgary was incorporated. So we're actually technically older than the city is. And it was formed basically to promote the agricultural potential of this region and drive settlement into the area. Now, I say that with complete acknowledgement for the injustices and the hardships that were inflicted upon First Nations people, but that was really why it started. And in 1886, they held the first Calgary Industrial Exhibition. And in industry at that time meant agriculture. And that first one was held just south of the Bow Tower in an open field. And then in 1889, the organization purchased what is now known as Stampede Park. They subsequently went broke and lost the mortgage, but R.B. Bennett purchased the land, donated to the city with the provision that they rent it back to the Agricultural Society. So they hosted this agricultural fair for several decades, and in the 1912, Guy Weddick and his wife Flores Ledoux put on the first Stampede with the backing of the Big Four, four local businessmen and cattle producers that financed it for $25,000 each, and they wanted this to be the best thing of its kind ever. It was a huge success. It drew 100,000 people. Weddick went back to the Big Four and said, let's do it again in 1913. And the Big Four said, no, we're good. And the reason they said that is because they did not think that it was going to be an ongoing event. That was not their desire. Their desire was to say goodbye to what they thought was a vanishing lifestyle. They saw row crops going in. They saw fences going up. They thought that basically the ranching way of life was dying. And so they saw it as kind of a last hurrah. So Weddick, undeterred, took it to Winnipeg. There was a Winnipeg Stampede in 1913. And unfortunately, it was the start of an economic downturn, and it didn't do as well. It drew about 60,000 people, and then World War I broke out afterwards, so it didn't stay in Winnipeg. Further undeterred, Guy Weddick put on a stampede in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, in 1916. And it did not do that well at all. Depending on which source you look at, it drew about 20,000 people. And I heard that, or read that a lot of rodeo contestants got stranded there because it was so far out of their normal travel route. But in 1919, at the end of World War I, he came back, or he actually lived here at that time. He approached the Big Four and said, we have to do another stampede for our returning service members. And they agreed. So the Victory Stampede happened in 1919. Now, mind you, the agricultural fair was running this entire time. And by 1923, the agricultural fair started to falter. And they had the idea of combining the industrial exhibition with the stampede. So the agricultural fair and the Western fair together, in 1923, it became the Calgary Exhibition and Stampede. And that's the way it's been ever since.
Whoa. Now, as being a Calgarian growing up, and I'm listening to all those stories coming in. Now, I want to go back to the $20,000. Mm-hmm. So on the second, when they were doing the second go around, okay, saying let's go again, what was their investment on the next?
They did the same thing. They put up $25,000 each. To host it and back. But they knew it would be a success because the one in 1912 was a success at that time. But the 1923 Stampede is significant because not only it was the first year that the two events merged, but that's when Chuckwagon racing was invented. Weedick wanted something new and interesting to promote the 23 Stampede, so he invented Chuckwagon racing. He invited 6 working Chuckwagons from 6 local ranches to come in and race. And at that time, it looked similar to today's races, except for they were actually working wagons instead of racing wagons. They weren't really pulled by thoroughbreds. They were pulled more by workhorses. But the first team across the finish line was not the winner. The winner was the first team to cross the finish line, unload their stove, and start a fire. And unfortunately, in 1924, the drivers figured out that if they soaked their wood in kerosene and they packed their fireboxes with paper, they could start a fire much quicker. And so after that, it was the first team across the line. That was also when the Pancake Breakfast was born. Wild Horse Jack Morton was the owner of one of the Chuckwagons, and he took his Chuckwagon on 8th Avenue, Stephen Avenue, and he cooked pancakes for people to promote the new sport and try and entice people to come to the park and witness this new sport of Chuckwagon racing. So in 2023, we celebrated 100 years of Chuckwagon racing and 100 years of pancakes.
Wow. So the chuck wagons were invented in Alberta, in Calgary.
Guy Weedick invented the sport of Chuckwagon racing, yes, in 1923.
And where is chuck wagon racing going today?
Pretty much Alberta and Saskatchewan would be the hotbed. But as you know, they're like NASCAR drivers. They're rock stars. These Chuckwagon drivers are. So immensely popular, particularly with a rural community. And these drivers are treated like royalty. And so we obviously still run Chuckwagons at the Calgary Stampede. It looks different. We've taken some measures to make it safer, 3 wagons instead of 4, and we pay special attention to the track, and we monitor the health of horses through veterinary inspections and other methods. But still going strong after 100 years.
Well, when you look at it, where you come from Houston, because you were with, what was the
Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo.
Livestock Show. What did you find the difference between the Calgary Stampede and there?
Well, it's similar in that they had a similar start. Their core mission of both organizations, or the core mission, is to really promote agriculture and celebrate Western heritage. So it's very similar.
So you had a little chuckle there.
Yeah.
Just right now I was saying that about the Calgary Stampede in Houston. What's the chuckle?
Well, here's the difference.
Okay.
Houston, most of their major entertainment is indoors. So the rodeo and the concerts, which is one ticket, happen in NRG Stadium. So that's the stadium where the Houston Texans play NFL football. It seats about 72,000. And they have 20 consecutive days of rodeo, which lasts about 2 hours. And then they pull a multi-million-dollar stage out in the middle beneath a huge center-hung cluster of video boards and lights. And they have a 1-hour concert with major entertainers, primarily country, but they'll certainly mix it up because Houston, like Calgary, is a very diverse community. And so they'll sell, on average about 66,000 tickets per rodeo performance. And then they have an absolutely enormous livestock show. So NRG Center is about 1.2 million square feet. The main exhibit hall is about 750,000 square feet. Half of that is livestock that cycles in and out, everything from swine to sheep to cattle over a 20-day period. They also have an enormous horse show as well. So they'll have, well over 15,000 livestock entries. So really a big livestock show, big horse show, bigger than Calgary would have. The similarities are, of course, the mission, Western heritage and agriculture. And you'll see a lot of similarities with the Midway and the entertainment and the effort to educate the general public on the importance of agriculture. The other difference is that Calgary Stampede, we operate the grounds year-round. And so we operate the BMO Center. We have a convention and event business. We have a youth campus. We own 2 ranches. One's a cattle ranch. One raises bucking horses. We actually own Cowboys Casino as well. So a very diverse year-round business model. Houston is a tenant at NRG Park, much like the Houston Texans NFL franchise. And they basically take control of the grounds for about 6 weeks a year, and they put on their event. They generate a lot of money, and then they award scholarships and they award grants to other organizations that conduct educational programming primarily for youth. So a different type of business model in that regard, year-round versus very event-driven. The other difference is we both have volunteers, very dedicated volunteers. Houston has about 35,000 volunteers that work on 110 committees. Calgary has about 3,000 volunteers on a little over 30 committees. And the difference there being that the Calgary Stampede volunteers are very programmatic driven, so they help with the horse show or a livestock show, or they're on the caravan committee and you make pancakes. Whereas probably half of Houston's volunteers are working committees. They offset paid labor. So they are driving golf carts, they're providing directions, they're selling tickets, they're scanning tickets. We don't really do that. We don't use volunteers for those purposes at Calgary because we operate the grounds year round. So we have now about 340 full-time employees. We have about 1,000 part-time employees. And it would be very difficult for us to tell a part-time employee, you've done a great job all year, but we don't need you during Stampede because a volunteer is going to do your job. So that's not the way that we utilize volunteers. We utilize them more for programs. And then we also employ a lot of first-time job students, 15-year-olds to 19-year-olds that will come and work. And we wouldn't want to offset that with volunteered labor either. So some similarities in the core mission of the organizations, but certainly differences in both the presentation and how they go about accomplishing their mission.
So when you're with Houston, I want to, because going back and talking about the Calgary Stampede and the Calgary Stampede as a whole, is that because you've known this Calgary Stampede forever and a day, were there ever any things that you were looking at the Calgary Stampede with their management team? Because it's a big organization here. Like when you look at it, it's massive, and they have a huge impact on Calgary's economy. It's massive. Yeah. And did you ever look at it and take ideas from Calgary and bring it back?
That is the great thing about the fair and festival industry is that we don't really compete for the same consumer. So it's a very open and sharing industry. And so other fairs, festivals throughout North America, and I would say throughout the world, are more than happy to welcome visitors from other fairs and festivals, show them exactly what they do. And it's that, rising tide lifts all boats kind of approach. There's always been a strong relationship between Calgary and Houston. And I know it dates back to the 80s because my first boss at Houston told me that when Houston bought their first IBM mainframe computer, he came to Calgary because the Calgary Stampede had purchased one, for example. And then we've worked together very closely on particularly rodeo and rodeo rules and presenting rodeo to an urban audience since I was at Houston and now at Calgary as well. So a very strong relationship between the two organizations.
So you leaving from Houston to here, was that ever a conflict? Like, it's not a conflict that, well, you shouldn't be leaving, but having the opportunity to all of a sudden when you're there, because I think, didn't you leave for a year?
Yeah. Yes.
And you had left, and then having the opportunity. How did you get the opportunity to come to Calgary?
Well, I was at the Houston Livestock Show for 15 years, and in 2020 we were required to shut down the show because of COVID midway through, and my daughters had both just graduated from college. And to be perfectly frank, I mean, I love Houston, but I didn't really like living there. Yeah. The traffic, the heat, the humidity. And my wife and I got to thinking, maybe we might want to do something different. And so there was a job open at the American Angus Association, which is the largest purebred beef association, and it was in Missouri. And my master's degree is in animal breeding and genetics. And so I went in to be the president of Angus Genetics Incorporated, oversee their genetic evaluation services and whatnot. And we were living in St. Joe, Missouri, and I received an email one day that this job was open. And it was surprising to me because I was not really connected to the industry that closely, but I was not aware that Warren Connell had passed. So the first thing I did is I Googled Warren's name and found out he had passed in December as a result of cancer. And then I forwarded the email to my wife. Now I have to go back about 6 months before that, when my wife and I were driving to Missouri to look at houses from Houston. She didn't want to fly at the outset of the pandemic, and I certainly didn't blame her for that. We're driving across Oklahoma, and she said, do you ever think you go back in the fair and festival business? And I thought for a minute, I said, I love it. But once you've been the CEO at the Houston Livestock Show, where would you go? And I thought a little while longer. I said, there is one place I would go, but I'm not a Canadian. And their CEO is about my age and has been there for 30 years. So no, I probably won't go back in the fair and festival business. She remembered that. So when I forwarded this notification that the job was open, her immediately text back to me was OMG. And I went through the interview process. They offered me the job. And when I called her to tell me they had offered me the job, I basically called her and I said, how would you like to move to Canada? And her immediate reply was, this was meant to be. And partly meant to be because I first came up here in 1993 and worked with one of the volunteer committees on a beef cattle judging school. And then, of course, my close relationship during Houston. So that was her immediate response. This was meant to be. And we both feel that.
So now, as entrepreneurs go in there and they're hiring people, okay, and the headache of going in there because the position that you're holding and then you're applying for this position, how long did it take them? So you come up for the interview. I want to go through that process of coming to Calgary for the interview. And what was that like?
They were not in a hurry because their immediate past president, the volunteer, had stepped into the CEO role, and their first vice chair stepped into the president and chair of the board role. So they were not in a big hurry. And then, of course, COVID was kind of slowing things down. I think I had 4 interviews total. One was a phone interview. The others were via Zoom. And those would have begun probably early March, late February, early March. And they offered me the position in April, kind of mid-April. So it really wasn't that long. But they didn't announce it until June. So I had to keep it fairly quiet until it went before the board in June for approval. And then wanting to get up here and meet, civic leaders and staff and volunteers, I came up in 2021 during COVID for the 2021 Stampede, just as an observer, as a guest, and then started the position on September 1st of 2021.
So now that you've started the position, September 21, now you're sitting in the board. Now all of a sudden, the board's going, all right, here's our vision, okay? Or I'm assuming they have their vision, their goals, and where they're going. Where do you see, or where did they see? Because now the BMO Center's in process. Now it's complete. Mm-hmm. And then what was the biggest surprise when you first started to go, this organization's bigger than I thought it was? Or was it like, oh, because you were out the outside looking into an organization. Was there a sudden movement that said, this is really interesting? I never knew that.
Yeah, not really, because I was very familiar. I was up here at the Stampede most of the years I worked at Houston, and Stampede volunteers and staff were in Houston most years, so I was pretty familiar. The BMO wasn't finished at that point. They'd just broken ground in 2021. But certainly it was on budget, on time. We knew it would be opening. Frankly, at that time, it was a matter of survival because unlike the U.S., not-for-profits in Canada are really discouraged from carrying a large financial reserve or investments of any kind. In Houston, they had a huge investment account. There was no question they were going to be able to weather the pandemic. Calgary Stampede, not a guarantee. They laid off about 80% of their workforce. And they were just basically trying to keep the organization alive and the lights on. They assumed a lot of debt. Debt got up close to $80 million for the organization. So initially it was survival. How do we work our way out of this, and how do we chart this multi-year recovery, which we're still traveling on that path with the multi-year recovery. We're a lot better off now than we were a year ago, and certainly better off than we were 2 years ago.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button. And let's get back to the episode.
So what was the greatest challenge that you had? So once you got started, what was that biggest challenge?
Yeah, it was really trying to put on a Stampede and really good year-round events at the quality that we wanted to, but without, straining ourselves financially as we ramped back up. Because the debt load was already there, and so we're trying to we basically, the Stampede lost $23 million in 2020 when the Stampede was canceled. Lost $8 million in 2021 with the partial Stampede. The entire business model is predicated on people gathering, and they couldn't gather for 2 years. And so we had to ramp back up from a very base level and provide a great product, whether at our year-round events or during the Stampede, on largely a shoestring budget. That was the biggest challenge.
So once you got through that challenge, okay, a new vision had to be formed, a new game plan. How do you see the Stampede and what does it mean for Calgary in the next, say, 10 years?
Yeah. Well, the big part of that would have been not just getting back to, I'd say, normal operations with regard to putting on an annual festival, 10-day festival, but ramping up the BMO Center and doing it in a really fiscally responsible way. So 2024 shaped up to be a somewhat challenging year because we were going to open this building in June and only get 6 months of revenue from it, yet we had to fully ramp it up by June. And so we actually budgeted a $5 million loss for 2024 because that's what it costs to ramp the building up. We actually ended up about $5 million to the good because the BMO Center performed and we had a record Stampede. But the BMO Center was a big part of that. But the larger vision is for the Culture and Entertainment District, which encompasses Stampede Park and North. And a big part of that was in 2023 when we reached agreement on the new event center, Scotia Place. That was huge for the organization. That resulted in a land sale to make it possible, as well as a land transfer to make it possible. So the Calgary Stampede sold about 5 acres of land to make that possible for $29.6 million. We took $25 million of that and paid down debt. The rest of it we used for working capital. But then we also traded 11 acres of land to make the event center possible for 13 acres of land kind of within the boundaries of Stampede Park. So that includes the Saddle Dome lands, which once the new event center, Scotia Place, is completed, the city will tear down the Saddle Dome and we get to add that space to our contiguous footprint, which is going to be huge with a growing event. And then about 1.8 acres in Weedickville. So essentially it's 17th Avenue and McLeod, where we sure hope to build a hotel to support our convention business. So the BMO was a big part of that and making sure that we ramped it up, but ramped it up in a fiscally responsible manner where it was sustainable in the short term.
So on the hotel side, because you said that you're getting it geared up for the hotels. Mm-hmm. Now, is that one of those things that is what we call as a non-negotiable? It has to have hospitality.
It has to have hotels. So prior to this expansion, the BMO Center was largely a trade and consumer show facility. So what that means is that trade shows, consumer shows, it'll be like a home and garden show or an RV show or auto show, come to town and they set up and thousands of people go through. They're local people. So it's a great service to the local community that these shows come to town and they can go see the latest RVs or the latest car, but it doesn't generate economic impact. Generating economic impact involves bringing people from outside of town. So they stay in hotels and they eat in restaurants. With the new BMO Center, we went from about 500,000 square feet to over 1 million square feet. There was about 110,000 square feet of additional exhibit space on the first floor, but the remainder of that space is meeting space, true convention space. So we can host conventions and we can draw these conventions from all over the world to come to Calgary. That's what generates the economic impact. When you talk to a convention organizer and they talk about hotels and lodging, they have 2 levels of objection, if you will. The first of which is I want all of my delegates to stay within walking distance. We clearly can't do that now. Now, on a nice day, it's not a bad walk from the BMO Center to a downtown hotel. It's really nice. But in the winter, not so pleasant. The second level of objection is I at least want my staff and I want my sponsors to stay in a hotel on site. That we can accomplish in the near term. And we actually have 3 sites around the BMO Center that are owned by the Calgary Stampede where we hope to eventually build 1,100 rooms. And we hope that others around Stampede Park and the Culture and Entertainment District will build hotels as well. But realistically, we need 2,500 rooms near the BMO Center for this BMO Center to truly fulfill its potential in driving economic impact.
Now, you guys are the ones going to build the actual hotels. for yourselves? How
Well,
many?
we won't build it. We'll work
work
with a developer and a brand. We have no desire to own a hotel. We have no desire to operate a hotel. We want the nearby hotels, and we hope to have a room block that far enough out we can book one of these major hotels, 2-3 years out, and they know that they have 200 to 800 rooms eventually that they can lock in for their convention.
So how long do you think it's going to take for hotels to start clicking to say, let's get in there? Because it seems like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Here's this whole organization, the Stampede. They're backing. The city's going to back it. You've got the BMO Center. You've got the Scotia Center. I figured that people would be jumping at the opportunity to say, I'm going to put a Marriott. I'm going to put a whatever hotel there. What's stopping it?
So there's tremendous interest. There's no doubt.
Right.
What's stopping it are the financials. Even though interest rates have subsided, and even though construction costs, current potential trade war notwithstanding, have mitigated to an extent, they're still higher than they were pre-pandemic. And so when you factor that in with the need for a 4-star upper upscale hotel, I mean, if we wanted Days Inns, we'd have those already. No offense to Days Inn, but that's not what a convention goer expects. They expect a 4-star upper upscale full service hotel. That adds to the expense. And so when a developer and a hotel brand, they calculate out, okay, it's going to cost this much to build the hotel. We expect to have this level of occupancy. We expect this average daily rate. It doesn't pencil out real well at this moment. And so it requires some incentive. And you see that all over North America where incentives are provided. So really, it's not that there isn't lack of interest or an unawareness of the need and the opportunity. It's really just the math when they calculate it. But we're working hard with a number of developers looking at proposals and hope to have our first hotel under construction, I would say, within the next year.
So what would be one of the cost is obviously prohibitive, but what would be one of the things that would help them out to motivate? Is it the government? Is it city? Is it Tourism Calgary? What's stopping them building something? Is there a tax break? I'm just throwing this out there, spitballing. Is there something that you would say, you know what, if this happened, let's do this and think outside the box and how we can get these guys in better? Yes, there's a cost. We understand that. But is there someone else to share that cost?
Yeah, and we're exploring all those options. I will tell you in the U.S., public-private partnerships are pretty common to get things like this built. They're not as common in Canada. And so you're kind of blazing new trail on the things that you just described. And so that adds a bit of a challenge to it as well. But we're certainly looking at every option to get a hotel financed and get it underway.
Would they ever look and consider joining forces with Houston Livestock and say, hey, they got an opportunity here for hotels because they have the cash behind it?
No, I don't think they would be interested.
No, that's what I'm saying. Everybody knows what's everybody doing. Would you be interested in having
no, I don't
some
think
hotels?
they'd be interested in doing that. It's a very local. I mean, we're working with developers that are not just from Canada, but they're doing the math just like everyone else is at this point. Working with a local developer, that would be great because they see it as, there's a community service aspect to it from a local developer standpoint. It's not just about, how much return can I get from this? And so it's really a mix of developers and also brands, hotel brands that we're speaking with on this. But we are working diligently to get that first one in the ground and get it opened up.
So what's your greatest challenge right now?
I would
It's not
say
hotels. It can't be hotels. Okay, let's cut it down to the hotels are out and this. But
I wouldn't say hotels are out.
Oh, not out. Sorry, I'm using it as a challenge.
No, getting the hotels built is crucial because it costs a lot of money to operate that BMO Center, and we want it full. And to be full, we need hotels. I mean that is the priority right now. Is hotels. It is the absolute priority. Because otherwise the business is severely challenged from the standpoint of drawing conventions. We are drawing conventions now because it's a great new facility, and some of these conventions have never been to Calgary. The question is, will we be on the rotation? Will they come back again if we don't have the hotels on site. So I would say that is the biggest challenge that we have right now. Now that we've paid down our debt, we are far more sustainable and far more stable than we have been. But right now, I mean, it's on everyone's mind, this potential trade war. What is the impact of that? Clearly, with tariffs, you have to be concerned with disposable income of consumers or even corporations, to come and do something at the Calgary Stampede, or I would say perceived disposable income. If they foresee trouble ahead, they probably won't spend as much. And then when you think about counter tariffs, that increases our expenses directly. So we're modeling that and tracking that. Now, one positive thing is that we might be able to benefit from greater Canadian visitation at the Calgary Stampede. We know a lot of Canadians are not traveling to the U.S. And so, for example, we're working with Tourism Calgary right now on Toronto advertising and marketing to try and get people to come to the Stampede this summer. Hey, you're not going to the U.S., come to the Calgary Stampede. So there are offsets with these things and there are opportunities with them. But right now, there's uncertainty. All of our internal metrics now look good for the Calgary Stampede, whether it be ticket sales for Rodeo or evening show. We had an incredible canvas auction last week, $3.84 million. 80% of that goes directly to the drivers, and we use the other 20% to pay for both that event and the hosting during Stampede. That's a good sign that corporate Calgary is still with us and investing. And then our premium seating is all but sold out right now, which is another good sign that corporate Calgary is supportive. So though there's uncertainty, there are some positive signs that this will be a good year for the Calgary Stampede.
Okay, so something a little bit off topic on this because I want to talk more about business and entrepreneurs and looking for one from Houston, thinking big picture, okay? Thinking of the Calgary Stampede, thinking big ideas. As entrepreneurs, how do you get people to think big ideas and to act on them?
Yeah, and so a lot of that, that's a lot of it's internal. So we have both an employee structure, a staff structure, which I have the great honor of leading, 340 some employees, and a very talented executive management team. And then on the volunteer side, we have the president and chair of the board that I work directly with, and then we have the board of directors, followed by shareholders and volunteers. Beyond that, it's really a matter of presenting opportunities and bringing in the right people to explain what these opportunities entail. And so next week, we're headed to a board retreat, and we're going to talk about a master plan or a concept plan for Stampede Park. What's the next iteration of Stampede Park? Because it has changed dramatically since the Calgary District and Agricultural Society purchased it in 1889. And the changes have occurred because the current facilities or the current layout at the time didn't meet needs or expectations. And we're at that point now. The Saddle Dome, as great as it is architecturally, it really doesn't meet needs and expectations anymore. And so it's giving way to Scotia Place. We have older infrastructure on Stampede Park that was built as long ago as 1919 that we're still using. Is there a better way? And then looking further into the future, because you don't want to do something in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years that impairs the ability of future us, I'll say, to do things down the line. So we also have to factor in long-term future considerations when we do this. But when we do things like this, whether it's a strategic plan, which the board completed last year at this time, or this concept plan for the park and what the future of the park looks like, we go out and find experts in the industry to come in and speak to them and really plant the seeds and get the thought going. And then we take it from there. Which course of action is best, and what does this park need to look like in the future?
That's actually amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What is the one advice that you would tell any entrepreneur or anybody in business and any Calgarian out there right now, besides come to the Stampede?
Well, that was going to be my first one, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I would say as it pertains to Calgary, this is an incredible community. It is an absolutely incredible community. There's this can-do, welcoming attitude. I've not found it anywhere else. And I don't just say that because I live here now. I mean, I felt it when I came here in 1993. And when you think of all the investment and all of the development that's going on in Calgary right now, whether it's the Culture and Entertainment District, the Event Center, Arts Commons transformation, the potential is absolutely incredible. So as I look at Calgary, and particularly the Culture and Entertainment District where we are, once Scotia Place is open, and there's a lot of land around there that's undeveloped at this time, that land doesn't want to be gravel parking lots forever, and it will be developed. And I think everyone knows that during Stampede we have a party tent, if you will, that primarily plays country music called Nashville North. There's no reason why Calgary can't be the Nashville of the North when you think about the potential of this development between the BMO Center, the future of Stampede Park, all the development that will surround Scotia Place, the new event center. You have the National Music Center, Music Mile, Arts Commons not far away, fantastic downtown core. Calgary can be the Nashville of the North. And I joke with people and I say, they ask me, what does success look like for you? And I said, well, success for me is if I walk down Stampede Trail along Scotia Place and I hang a right and I walk to the east on the north side of Scotia Trail or Scotia Place, and I encounter 5 different bachelorette parties, we have succeeded. And anyone who's been to Nashville knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh my gosh.
But just the potential it's just immense and really exciting right now. So if you see a way to harness that and participate in that, you should do it because, I'm invested long in Calgary.
That is awesome.
And I'm incredibly bullish about Calgary because of all this that's happening. And it's driven by people. It really is. I will share with you that friends from the States who have never been to Calgary, they asked me, what's it like? And I said, well, it's great. My wife and I actually grew up in Colorado, so this feels like home anyway, right? But I tell them Calgary is wonderful. What's best about Calgary, it's the people, obviously, the welcoming can-do attitude. But the best thing is that it's big enough, but small enough. It's big enough to have everything you want. I mean, professional sports, arts, culture, entertainment, museums, restaurants, recreation, public transit. But it's small enough where it's welcoming, it's unintimidating, and it's usable. So my wife would never dare drive into downtown Houston. No way. She has no problem going into downtown Calgary, just as an example. So big enough but small enough. It's to me, it's the perfect city.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. You know what, Joel? This was a pleasure having you on Shed Talk. Like and subscribe, hit that button, do whatever you can. Thanks very much for coming on Shed Talk.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk.